Amelia Dyer was one of the most prolific serial killers in history. She murdered infants in her care for a 30-year period in Victorian Britain. Amelia Dyer was born the youngest of 5 children. She had 3 brothers, Thomas, James, and William, and a sister named Anne. Her parents were Samuel and Sarah Hobley. Her father was a master shoemaker. They all lived in a small village of Pall Marsh, just east of Bristol. In her early years, she was a good student. Amelia learned to read and write and developed a love of literature and poetry. She would often spend hours reading. She even wrote her own poems. However, her childhood was marred by the mental illness of her mother caused by typhus. Typhus is caused by fleas or lice that ingest infective blood of rats, cats, raccoons, and other animals. If a human is bitten by one of these infected fleas, they develop typhus. Amelia suffered despair as her mother's condition worsened. She witnessed her mother's violent fits on a daily basis. She was obliged to care for her mother. Amelia loved her mother dearly, but in 1848 her mother died, raving and delirious. Needless to say, she was devastated by her mother's death. Watching someone die from typhus is very traumatizing, especially your own mother. This had a lasting effect on Amelia's psyche, but it also taught her what symptoms were exhibited by those who appear to be losing their mind through mental illness, something she would put to good use years later. After her mother's death, Amelia lived with an aunt in Bristol for a while serving as an apprentice with a corset maker. Her father died in 1859. Her eldest brother Thomas inherited the family shoe business. But in 1861, at the age of 24, Amelia became permanently estranged from her brother James. She then found lodgings in a boarding house on Trinity Street. There, she married 59-year-old George Thomas. They both lied about the ages on the marriage certificate to reduce the age gap. George had docked 11 years from his age, and Amelia added 6 years to hers. Nursing had always been an interest to Amelia, and after marrying George Thomas, she trained as a nurse. In Victorian Britain, this was considered a respectable occupation. Life as a nurse, however, was very hard. But through her hard work, she met a midwife named Ellen Dame, who just happened to also be a baby farmer. Amelia learned of an easier way to earn a living. Ellen Dame told her she could use her home to provide lodgings for babies from young women who had conceived illegitimately, and then farm off the babies for adoption, or better yet, just allow them to die of neglect and malnutrition, basically just starve the children to death. The practice known as baby farming boomed in 1834 after the Poor Law Amendment Act was passed. It removed any financial obligation from fathers of illegitimate children. Unmarried mothers in Victorian Britain always struggled to make an income to bring up their children, especially when single parents were always stigmatized. They were always shunned by society. This led to the practice of baby farming, in which individuals acted as adoption or foster parents. This was done in return for regular payments or a single upfront one-time fee from the baby's mothers. Many businesses were set up to take in these young women and care for them until they gave birth. The mothers then left their unwanted babies to be looked after by the foster parents. These babies became known as nurse children. The predicament of the parents involved was often exploited for financial gain. If a baby had well-off parents who were simply anxious to keep the birth secret, the single fee might be as much as £80. £50 might be negotiated if the father of the child wanted to hush up his involvement. However, it was more common for these young women to be impoverished and desperate. These women would be charged about £5. Unscrupulous carers resorted to starving the farmed-out babies, to save money and even to hasten death. Noisier, demanding babies would often be sedated with easily available alcohol and opiates. This was always chosen because children loved the sweet taste of it. It would also numb the pain of hunger and disguise starvation. This was because when babies are continuously fed opium, they would not want to eat and slowly die from malnutrition. Many children died as a result of such dubious practices. Opium killed far more infants through starvation than directly through an overdose. Death from severe malnutrition would result, but a coroner was most likely to record the death as debility from birth, or lack of breast milk, or simply starvation. Mothers who chose to reclaim or simply check on the welfare of their children would often encounter difficulties. Even though many mothers pleaded to see their children, they would simply be too frightened or ashamed to tell the police about any suspected wrongdoing. Even the authorities often had problems tracing any children that were reported missing. This was the world opened up to Amelia by her friend Ellen Dane. Amelia Dyer had to leave nursing with the birth of a daughter, Ellen Thomas. And in 1869, the elderly George Thomas died and Amelia needed an income. Amelia decided that baby farming could help her make money, especially if she had training as a nurse. She advertised to nurse and adopt babies in return for a one-off payment. She said she would provide adequate clothing for the child. In her advertisements and meetings with clients, she assured them that she was married and that her and her husband would provide a safe and loving home for the child. Dyer was apparently very keen to make money from baby farming. At some point in her baby farming career, Dyer decided to forego the expense and inconvenience of letting the children die through neglect and starvation. Soon after the receipt of each child, she murdered them, thus allowing her to pocket most or all of the fee. Helen Dane, who had fled to the U.S. herself to escape the authorities that taught her well. Amelia Dyer evaded any police investigation for a long time until she was eventually caught in 1879 after a doctor was suspicious about the number of child deaths she had called him to certify. Strangely though, she was not convicted of murder or manslaughter, but instead was sentenced to 6 months of hard labor for neglect. Upon release, she attempted to resume her nursing career, but the experience of doing hard labor almost destroyed her. Amelia began abusing alcohol and opium-based products. In 1890, Amelia cared for the illegitimate baby of a governess. When the governess returned to visit her baby, she became suspicious of the child she was handed. She stripped the baby to see if a birthmark was present on its hips. The baby had none. The governess reported this to the authorities, and when they started to investigate, Amelia drank 2 bottles of laudanum in a serious suicide attempt. But her long-term abuse had built up a tolerance to opium products. She survived, but was not prosecuted due to lack of evidence. She returned to baby farming and murder. Amelia decided that she no longer wanted to involve doctors and began disposing of the bodies herself. The nature and extent of her activities again prompted unwanted attention. She was alert to the attention of the police and of parents seeking to reclaim their children, so she and her family frequently moved to different towns and cities to escape suspicion. Then Amelia would start all over again and acquire new business. Over the years, Amelia used many different identities. In 1895, Amelia moved to Caversham, accompanied by an unsuspecting associate named Jane Granny Smith, who she had recruited from a brief spell in a workhouse, and her daughter Mary Ann, also known as Polly, and her son-in-law Arthur Palmer. This was followed by a move to 45 Kensington Road, Reading, Berkshire later the same year. Smith was told by Dyer to call her mother in front of innocent women handing over their children. This was an effort to present a caring mother-daughter image. In January 1896, Evelina Marmon, a popular 25-year-old barmaid, gave birth to a daughter named Doris in a boarding house. She was unable to raise the child alone, so she sought offers of adoption. She placed an advertisement in the Bristol Times and Mirror newspaper. It simply read, "Wanted, respectable woman to take a young child." Evelyn intended to go back to work and hopefully eventually to reclaim her child. Coincidentally, next to her own was an advertisement placed by Amelia Dyer under the name Miss Harding, which read, "Married couple with no family would adopt healthy child. Nice country home. Terms, £10. Marmon responded to a Miss Harding, and a few days later she received a reply from Dyer. From Oxford Road and Reading, Miss Harding wrote that, "I would be glad to have a dear little baby girl, one I could bring up and call my own." She continued, "We are plain homely people in fairly good circumstances. I don't want a child for money's sake, but for company and home comfort. Myself and my husband are dearly fond of children. I have no child of my own. A child with me will have a good home and a mother's love." Evelina Marmon wanted to pay a more affordable weekly fee for the care of her daughter, but Miss Harding insisted on being given the one-off payment in advance. Marmon was in dire straits, so she reluctantly agreed to pay the £10, and a week later Miss Harding arrived in Cheltenham to meet her. Marmon was apparently surprised by Dyer's advanced age and stocky appearance, but as Dyer was affectionate towards Doris, Evelina handed over her daughter, a cardboard box of clothes, and the £10. Still distressed at having to give up her daughter, Evelina accompanied Dyer to Cheltenham Station and then on to Gloucester. She returned to her lodgings a broken woman. A few days later, she received a letter from Miss Harding saying all is well. Marmon wrote back, but received no reply. In fact, Amelia Dyer did not travel to Reading as she told Marmon. She went to 76 Mayo Road, Willesden, London, where her 23-year-old daughter Polly was staying. There, Dyer quickly found some white edging tape used in dressmaking, wound it twice around the baby's neck and tied a knot. Death would not have been immediate. Dyer later said, "I used to watch them with the tape around her neck, but it was soon all over for them." Both women allegedly helped to wrap the body in a napkin. They kept some of the clothes Marmon had packed. The rest was destined for the pawnbroker. Dyer then paid her rent to the landlady and gave her a pair of child's boots as a present for her little girl. The following day, Wednesday, April 1st, 1896, another child named Henry Simons was taken to Mayo Road. However, with no spare white edging tape available, the length around Doris's corpse was removed and used to strangle the 13-month-old boy. On April 1st, both bodies were stacked into a carpet bag, along with bricks for added weight. Dyer then headed for Reading. She knew of a secluded spot near a weir at Caversham Loch. She forced the carpet bag through the railings into the River Thames. Unbeknownst to Dyer, on the 30th of March 1896, a package was retrieved from the River Thames in Reading by a bargeman. The package Dyer had dumped was not weighted properly and was easily spotted. It contained the body of a baby girl, later identified as Helena Fry. In the small detective force available to the Reading Borough Police, Detective Constable Anderson made a crucial breakthrough. As well as finding a label from the Temple Mead Station, Bristol, He used a microscopic analysis of the wrapping paper and deciphered a faintly legible name, Miss Thomas, and an address. This evidence was enough to lead police to Dyer, but they still had no strong evidence to connect her directly with a serious crime. Additional evidence they gleaned from witnesses and information obtained from Bristol police only served to increase their suspicions. D.C. Anderson with Sergeant James placed Dyer's home under surveillance. Intelligence suggested that Dyer would run if she came under suspicion. The officers decided to use a young woman as a decoy, hoping she'd be able to secure a meeting with Dyer to discuss her services. This was designed to help detectives link Dyer to her business activities. And when Dyer was expecting her new client, the decoy, to call, she instead found detectives waiting on her doorstep. On the 3rd of April, Good Friday, police raided her home. They were apparently struck by the stench of human decomposition, but no human remains were found. There was, however, plenty of other related evidence, including white edging tape, telegrams regarding adoption arrangements, pawn tickets for children's clothing, receipts for advertisements, and letters from mothers inquiring about the well-being of their children. The police calculated that in the previous few months alone, at least 20 children had been placed in the care of Miss Thomas, now revealed to be Amelia Dyer. It also appeared that she was about to move again, this time to Somerset. This rate of murder has led to some estimates that Miss Dyer may, over the course of decades, have killed over 400 babies and children, making her one of the most prolific murderers ever. Dyer was arrested on the 4th of April and charged with murder. Her son-in-law Arthur Palmer was charged as an accessory. During April, the Thames was dredged and 6 more bodies were discovered, including Doris Marmon and Harry Simmons, Amelia's last victim. Each baby had been strangled with white tape, which, as Amelia later told police, was how she could tell it was one of mine. At the inquest in early May, no evidence was found that Mary Ann or Arthur Palmer had acted as Dyer's accomplices. Arthur Palmer was discharged as a result of a confession written by Amelia Dyer. In the Reading jail, she wrote, "Sir, will you kindly grant me the favor of presenting this to the magistrates on Saturday the 18th, the instant I have made this statement out, for I may not have an opportunity then. I must relieve my mind, I do not know, and I feel my days are numbered on this earth, but I do feel it is an awful thing drawing innocent people into trouble. I do know I shall have to answer before my Maker in heaven for the awful crimes I have committed. But as God is my judge in heaven and on earth, neither my daughter Mary Ann Palmer, nor her husband Alfred Ernest Palmer, I do most solemnly declare neither of them had anything at all to do with it. They never knew I contemplated doing such a wicked thing until it was too late. I am speaking the truth and nothing but the truth. As I hope to be forgiven, I myself and I alone must stand before my Maker in heaven. Witness my hand, Amelia Dyer." On the 22nd of May, 1896, Dyer appeared at the Old Bailey and pleaded guilty to one murder, that of Doris Marmon. Her family and associates testified at her trial that they had been growing suspicious and uneasy about her activities, and it emerged that Dyer had narrowly escaped discovery on several occasions. Evidence from a man who had seen and spoken to Dyer when she had disposed of the 2 bodies at Caversham Loch also proved significant. Her daughter also gave graphic evidence that ensured Dyer's conviction. The only defense Dyer offered was insanity. It took the jury only 4.5 minutes to find her guilty. For 3 weeks in her cell, she filled 5 exercise books with her last true and only confession. Visited the night before her execution by the chaplain and asked if she had anything to confess, she offered him her exercise book, saying, "Isn't this enough?" Dyer was hanged by James Billington at Newgate Prison on Wednesday the 10th June 1896. Asked on the scaffold if she had any last words, Amelia said, "I have nothing to say."
Welcome to my channel. This is Mr. Scary. Hope you enjoy the show.